So one of my dear friends' wives just passed, not wives, wife just passed 2.5 months ago. She's had Parkinson's for 20 years. She developed early onset Alzheimer's, but she wasn't terminal, but she suddenly passed, and it was devastating for him. And he had to do everything on his own. They didn't have children. Her family's not really helping him grieve. And I just said, just be mindful of signs. I feel like Char's gonna reach out to you. She's gonna make herself known, because he goes, I just wanna make sure she's okay. So he came home from the hospital that night, and they had a nightlight in their kitchen that was burnt out for years. And when they came home, it was, when he came home, it was on, and it stayed on. So you guys can relate your personal stories, but I tell my friends, you know, they may not talk to you. Your father may not go, Jeff, I'm really proud of you. But you may drive by a billboard with high karate up there, and that's what your dad wore when you were growing up, high karate or brute. And that's them saying, I'm okay, I'm fine. But we're not cognizant of it because we don't really pay attention.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any stories?
There's signs
everywhere.
Oh, they're everywhere when you're open.
When you realize that you are source embodiment and that you are magical because we get to live and life is a gift, and you start to imagine that you're seeing through the vision of source, you notice that absolutely everything is a sign. The fact that the number 7, you know, that the age 7 comes through, that's synchronistic, that's a sign. The fact that the house I'm staying in with my mom's friend happens to be a street away from my best friend in San Diego and where she grew up, and she's going through quite a lot tonight, was a sign of validation. You know, there are these signs that just show us little things. It can be animals that come to us multiple times, or one random animal. We can look up the spiritual meaning. It can be plants that come to us in a dream. It can be synchronistic, like numbers, the same numbers every day, 222, 1111, like all of these things. The light switches that go on and off, or when you're walking by an outdoor light, the big tall light, and they just go off when you walk by, or they turn on when you walk by. I mean, these are all, we are electrical beings, right? And the more frequency we put off, the more we see. And the more that we see signs in everything, the more we receive signs. So it's almost a practice. And that's what I work with my clients. When they go through the experience, I say, okay, this was just the beginning. You've had an experience of connecting to the other side, of receiving what messages you need. Your brain has an association with an intention, with an experience you want to see in the world. Now open your eyes, go into the world, everything you see, every dream, every experience, everything on earth. Earth is really powerful with signs. You know, the feeling, the clouds, the sun rays, the trees.
How do you ascertain what might be what you want to be a sign and it's not really a sign?
Well, I tell people, if a message comes through and there's an emotion attached, like fear, I would say that is working through a human part of the psyche. Right, so in my work, I see this every day where people go through it. But if there's a detachment and no energy comes around it, it's just a knowing, then I tell people that I would, you know, consider that to be a message. If an animal comes more than 1 time, 2 times, then I'd say look that up and just see, does it resonate with you? If you get chills, consider it a sign. You know, teaching people to find a friend, right, that they can, if they have a sign, they can go to this friend who is safe and say, this is what I got from this song lyric that keeps coming up in my head. And then the person can be their feedback loop. That's developing the ability to recognize signs by having someone safe to talk to. So, yeah.
Jeff, can you talk about the rainbows? Because we were talking about that in the break, and I think that's a very powerful story.
You don't think it's too much?
No.
Well, I've been an innate skeptic of signs. I tend to think people look for signs in a tribute meeting where there shouldn't be any, and just before my daughter passed, her husband took the 2 kids and they went home to shower and get some clean clothes, and they were on their way back to my house because my daughter was at my house when she passed away. And before they got back, she passed. And there were only 2 people in the world that knew she had passed away at that point. One of them was a lifelong friend who was en route, and I had texted her because she asked me specifically about it, and I acknowledged that Rachel had passed. And the other one was Todd, her husband, who was also on his way back to the house. And this, right after my daughter passed, right after Rachel passed, this friend burst into the house. She goes, I got to show you something. I got to show you something. And she pulled out her phone, started showing me this picture. She said, on the way here, there was this beautiful rainbow centered right over your house.
Yeah.
And she went on and on about it. And I said, wow, I didn't even know it was raining. She goes, it's not. It's not raining. And just as she finished, her husband arrived, and he came in and he said almost exactly the same thing, that he saw this beautiful rainbow on the way. And I thought, well, that's nice, that's wonderful. And later that evening, my youngest daughter, 2 years younger than Rachel, said that she was feeling sad that Todd and the kids weren't there when Rachel passed. And then she heard Rachel's voice say, if he'd been there, he wouldn't have seen my rainbow.
Yeah. Oh,
He'd have been in the house. He wouldn't have seen it.
that's so...
And at that point, Todd got emotional and divulged to me that the day before, when we were at the oncologist's office, when we talked about setting up hospice,
Yeah.
she had nodded, yeah, it was time, and he leaned over and whispered in her ear, and I hadn't heard what he said. What he'd whispered in her ear was, after you pass, please send me a sign and let me know you're okay. Yeah. And he interpreted the rainbow as that beautiful sign. And then when it came time for her funeral, we'd had this beautiful sunny weather, and on the day of her funeral, it was sprinkling rain. Not enough to disrupt anything, but just enough that when we went to the cemetery, there was this big rainbow. Yeah. And since then, I've had all these experiences in the desert where we don't see many rainbows. It's like Rachel's sending me all of these rainbows in atypical ways. Like I went to get a drink of water not too long ago, and when I reached for the glass in the cabinet, there was a rainbow cast across the cabinet door from the glass window, refracting it. And then I pulled up a blind in my den where I was working, which is normally down. I never pay attention to it. And something caught my attention. I turned and looked out the window, and I was looking right through this big rainbow decal on the window that's been there for over 30 years since we bought the house that I'd never paid attention to before. And then I talked about my book I wrote. I read a chapter of that book. I hadn't read it for over a year. I thought, well, you ought to read it before you publish it. So I'm reading this chapter, and the main character, Solace Murphy, walks into Zen's bedroom that's been closed for 5 years. Nobody's opened the door, and he walks in and he picks up a bottle of perfume that he bought her in Paris and smells it and takes in her essence. And then he sits down on the floor and he feels her presence, which was distinctly unusual for him because he didn't have those experiences. He was a very left-brain scientific guy. And he feels her presence. And as he feels her presence, he looks across the room, and there on the wall are all these rainbows that the beveled glass windows in her bedroom had cast on the far wall. And as I was just stunned by it, I wept. And I felt like I heard Rachel say, Dad, because I'm not a rainbow guy. I don't believe in signs, right?
No, I was going to ask, how do you feel about signs now?
And it was like I heard Rachel say, Dad, you wrote your own sign years ago. I'm just honoring it.
Oh.
I'd written the book.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just not even half the stories I've had in the last few months with the rainbows. I mean, my wife went to a conference about life after loss, this grieving conference. And on the way home from the conference, there was a rainstorm, and there was this huge rainbow while she's driving home from the conference. When we were putting together pictures of my daughter for the funeral, the three things that really mattered to her were her husband, her marriage, her kids, and her job. And the three pictures we found, one of them is her job. She's in her life flight helmet, in the air, in the aircraft, talking on the radio, and there's this big rainbow coming out the side.
Wow.
I mean, it's not from rain, it's a photographic artifact, but it's there and nobody had ever noticed it before. And there's this picture of her kids. I sent this picture of her kids to her husband, and he immediately sent it back to me with a text that said, did you notice the rainbow?
Wow.
And there's this rainbow across the bottom of the, I'd never noticed. And her younger sister took her wedding pictures before she got married. And one of the wedding pictures has this big rainbow coming right out of her dress. And it's like the three things that most mattered to her, we found these pictures that nobody had ever seen these rainbows in these pictures before. And it just kind of goes on and on. I was talking with a friend of mine about this very thing, somebody that's really into signs. I was telling her about all these rainbows, and I was texting with a couple friends about it. When I got done, I was laying on my bed. When I got done, I stood up and I picked up the blanket that I'd had over me and I folded it up and flopped it over the footboard of the bed. And I looked at it and it was a big rainbow pattern on the blanket. I'm going, you gotta be kidding me.
You can't make that stuff up. You can't make that stuff.
Do you believe now?
Yeah, do you believe now?
I'm starting to.